Hi, so in this video we are going to talk about how to take the square root of variables. Now, in our last video we talked about taking the square root of perfect squares. So for example, taking the square root of 4 will give you 2, taking the square root of 16 will give you 4, 5, and 6, and we talked about what perfect squares were. Then we looked at examples of simplifying non-perfect squares under the radical, such as root 70, root 110, root 35, numbers like these that are not perfect squares. We can take the square root of them, and most of the time we can simplify them. Now we want to talk about how to take the square root of variables, because we'll start to see examples where we'll need to simplify expressions that look like this, where there are non-perfect squares or perfect squares underneath the radical with variables, and sometimes they may even have coefficients outside of them. So let's work on variables first before we get to something like this. Now we want to talk about how to take the square root of any variable, or just to be able to simplify the radical. So let's start with talking about what a square root does. So it finds the number that you multiplied by itself to get what is underneath the radical. So whenever you're multiplying, whenever you're taking the square root of something like 4, well, we know that 4 is a perfect square because it's the same thing as 2 times 2. And when we take the square root of 4, we're going to take out the number that multiplied by itself to get that. In this case, it's 2. So we know that we're going to end up taking this 2 out of the radical. And our answer is just 2 for the square root of 4. Another example I could give is square root 25. Now we know 25 is the same thing as 5 times 5. Well, we're looking for the pairs. The one number that multiplied by itself gives you the number under the radical. We can take this pair of 5 and move it out of the radical. This is just kind of a shortcut way to show that if you were able to break a number down into two things multiplied by itself, then you can take it out of the radical. So we want to talk about how we can do that with variables as well. So if we had the square root of x to the 4th power. Well, we know that x to the 4th power is the same thing as x times x times x times x. Remember when we multiply monomials, we multiply the coefficient and add the exponent. So we're adding all of these exponents here, exponents of 1. That would give you x to the 4th. Well, let's remind ourselves that this is our goal. When we're looking at how to take numbers outside of the radical, we want to look for pairs, because we know something like x squared lends itself to x times x. Well, we know x times x gives us x squared. So the square root of x squared would be x. We're looking for the pairs of numbers so that we can pull them out of the radical. So here we have 2 pairs of x's, so we can show that since we have 2 pairs of x's in here, that's x squared.